Well, Chris Uhlmann is standing by in Canberra. Chris, you asked Julia Gillard how she thought she'd lost public sentiment along the way on climate change. What's your analysis on that question?
Well, Lee, if you think back, this debate on climate change goes back a long way, and particularly the debate on a carbon price goes back quite a long way to the 2007 election, when the government really won the argument for the future based on its argument for climate change. And then really for the first 2 years, up until December 2009, they kept that argument with the coalition, both of them agreeing to have a price on carbon. It was only in December 2009 that, by the time that they'd gotten rid of the second opposition leader, Malcolm Turnbull, that the Tony Abbott line on a great big new tax came in. So they had a long time where they had political consensus. But the really big fracture came when this government, or the Rudd government, decided that it was not going to proceed with its own ETS before the last election. And then, of course, we saw the Prime Minister rule out herself at the just before the last election a tax on carbon. So how did the Labor Party get to the point that it's in now? Well, it drove a long way itself to get to where it is now. It took a long time and a lot of effort, really, on the part of the Labor Party to make sure that it got to a point now where it does seem that it has lost a lot of community sentiment.
You mentioned in that interview the drubbing that Labor took in today's news poll. What's been the private reaction to that in Canberra on both sides of politics?
Well, Lee, never believe it when a politician tells you that they're not interested, he or she is not interested in the polls. They study polls more closely than anybody else. And in fact, on Monday nights in Canberra, before a news poll, people do start ringing around to try and get some sense of what's happening with the figures. So they've looked long and hard at these, and these are disastrous figures. But that said, it is a long way out from the next election, and the realists are saying that this is an argument that they do believe that they can win in the long run. But people are asking questions about the strategy behind this. If you rewind about 2 weeks, you'll recall that Tony Abbott was in a pretty dire circumstance. There was a lot of infighting in the coalition. Well, this argument was started by the government at the time when it was worse for Tony Abbott. It gave him a cause that he could champion, and that was a really important thing for him. He has turned things around for himself in that time, and things have got considerably worse for the government. So inside the Labor Party, there's a lot of questioning about what the political strategy was behind this, and again, how they managed to be rerunning some of the arguments from the past just as badly as they did in the past.
Chris, let's look forward. What's the Prime Minister up to in Washington tomorrow?
She's going to meet Hillary Clinton, and of course tomorrow US time is International Women's Day, so she will spend some time with her. She's also going to meet the intelligence chiefs, but the really big day comes the following day when she will address that joint sitting of both houses of Congress. And you'd have to say, Lee, that she's been remarkably well treated by the Americans. She's staying at Blair House, which is the presidential guest house, which is not something that's afforded to every world leader. And of course, speaking to both houses of Congress is something that also happens reasonably rarely. And she had a second event with the President today, and that was to go off to that school where they joked about football and about Vegemite. So the pictures coming out of the United States at the moment are very good for the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, things overseas look a little bit rosier than they do domestically.
Chris, on the US, you spoke in that interview about how far away they were from pricing carbon. Just give us a little bit more context around that. What exactly is the situation in the US on that issue?
Well, the United States has basically lots of Democrats have lost at a national level. They have lost the debate on pricing carbon. So now what's happening, and particularly those people who ran the Tea Party campaign, they are moving on to the state-based schemes that the Prime Minister talked about. Now, there are about 3 of them in the United States that are running that do involve various states of the United States. But to give you just an example on one, in the Western region, there are 7 US states and 4 Canadian provinces which were signed up over a period of time to be into a carbon trading system. Well, the only one left in that now is California. All of the Republican states are removing their states from those carbon trading systems. So the US is in retreat on this, and it is interesting to contrast really what we're told often in Australia about what's happening on an international stage and what is actually happening.
Okay, Chris Uhlmann, thank you very much. We'll talk tomorrow.
Thanks, Lee.